Welcome, everyone, to another YIVO Fellowship lecture. Today's lecturer is Yael Levy. She is the 2023-2024 recipient of the Dina Abramovich Emerging Scholar Fellowship. And Yael is a historian specializing in modern Yiddish culture and American Jewish history. She earned her PhD in history from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where she currently serves as a postdoctoral fellow and adjunct lecturer in Yiddish culture. Recently, Yael completed a year-long fellowship at Harvard Center for Jewish Studies and at YIVO as well, where, as I said, she was the recipient of the Dina Abramovich Emerging Scholar Fellowship. Her work focuses on a monograph about the phenomenon of suicide among East European Jewish immigrants in the United States at the turn of the 20th century. Her books include From the Cellar to the Top Floor, The Emergence of the Yiddish and Hebrew Press in the United States, 1870 to 1900, and The Spirit That Materials Bear, a bilingual Yiddish-Hebrew edition of Dvorah Fogel's poetry. And both of these books are in Hebrew. Her lecture today is entitled America, A New World for Jewish Children, an unknown letter by Sholem Aleichem in the YIVO archives. And I just want to mention again that we will have some time for questions at the end. And if you do have one, please leave it in the question and answer section of the Zoom. Now, please join me in welcoming Yael Levy.
Thank you, Eddie. I hope you can see my screen. Can you? just let me know that you see it so I can start.
Yeah, it's fine. We can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. First of all, I'm deeply grateful to the YIVO Institute for awarding me the Dina Abramovich Emerging Scholar Fellowship. And it's an honor, and it was very helpful for my research. Today, we will explore Sholem Aleichem's experience and perceptions of America through an unknown letter discovered in the Herman Bernstein collection at YIVO, examining how this document illuminates both his personal journey and his literary engagement with the American Jewish experience. But first, let's begin with a brief overview of Sholem Aleichem's life to establish the necessary context. A super popular Yiddish author, Sholem Aleichem was a preeminent writer of modern Yiddish literature. Born as Shalom Rabinowitz in 1859 in Pereyaslav, Ukraine, he spent his formative years in Voronezh. The loss of his mother in childhood led to his upbringing by his father and stepmother. Rabinowitz received traditional Jewish education as well as Russian education in a secondary school. This is Sholem Aleichem's house in Kiev. In 1877, he began working as a tutor for the daughter of Elimelech lawyer, Olga, with whom he fell in love and later married. In 1880, he was elected as the crown rabbi of Lubny, a position he held until 1883. The following years saw significant development in both his personal and professional life. In 1885, his father-in-law died and he became a wealthy man. In 1887, the family moved to Kiev, where Rabinowitz became involved in the stock market. He also published the first volume of the almanac, the Yiddish Volksbibliothek, the Jewish People's Library. You can see this picture below. In 1888. However, the publication of the second volume in 1889 coincided with financial difficulties, and by 1890, he faced bankruptcy and was forced to move to Odessa. It was during the 1880s that the persona Sholem Aleichem emerged. This period of financial instability, however, proved creatively fertile, as the 1890s saw him develop two of his most enduring characters, Menachem Mendel and Tevye. When the Yiddish newspaper, Der Yud, was established in 1899, Sholem Aleichem published there regularly. In 1905, the pogroms following the Russian Revolution led him to leave the Russian Empire, and in October 1906, he arrived in New York for the first time, where he lived until 1907. Upon returning to Europe, Sholem Aleichem and his family moved from one place to another due to financial hardships and his health problems. They were in Geneva, Berlin, in Italy, and other cities. In 1914, as World War I broke, the family escaped to Copenhagen, and Sholem Aleichem, with his wife and three of his children, returned to New York, where he lived and published his works until his death in May 1960. So, as you can see on this timeline, Sholem Aleichem spent two separate periods in the United States, during 1906-1907, and again from 1914 to 1916. The first period was the catalyst for his literary work on American themes in general and Motl, the Cantor's son, Motl Paisid and Chadens in particular. While Sholem Aleichem's physical encounter with America came later, his literary engagement with the theme began much earlier. In 1892, he published Shlof My King, Sleep My Boy, a lullaby that became deeply embedded in Jewish folk culture and was considered, quote unquote, a folk song, even though his author was known, by the turn of the century. This piece, though seemingly simple, encapsulated the complex dynamics of Jewish migration from the Russian Empire to America during the 1880s and 1890s. The song gives voice to a mother singing to her child about the father in America, weaving together themes of separation, hope, and the promise of reunion. And this is a page from the published manuscript, and you can see Sholem Aleichem's own handwriting with comments and then his autograph here on the left side. So I'll read some of the Yiddish original, followed by the English translation. Schlaf mein Kind, mein Dreis, mein Schöner, schlaf je Junen ju, schlaf mein Kroin, mein Kaidisch Einer, schlaf je Lululu. Bei den Wiegel sitzt dein Mame, singt ein Lied und weint, wirst amol verstehen, Miss Tome, was sie hat gemeint. Now to the American part. In America is der Tate, deiner Lululu. Du bist noch a Kind le Tate, schlaf je Junen ju. Das Amerika ist für jeden, sagt man, nur Gora Glick und für jeden a Gan Eden, etwas an Antik. Dorten ist wenn der Woche Chale zunen ju. Jaichelach will ich dir kochen, schlafje lululu. And the last part I want to read on the second page. Wird schicken $20 sein Porträt dazu und wird nehmen, leben soll uns ahin zu. So the English translation is as follows. You can read it here. I'll read some of it, but I also want us to hear a 1916 recording of this poem.
We're not able to hear the recording.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. So I'll skip that part. So I'll read the English part. Your dad is in America 1,000 miles away. You're still a tiny baby. What more can I say? In the weekdays, so they tell me, they eat white bread, son. chicken broth I'll make for you there. Sleep now, little one. And the last part is where the mother said the father will send $20 and his portrait, his photograph, and will bring the mother and child to him there to America. um, so let's just have a look and examine the lyrics in detail. So the mother speaks of America as a land where everyone can find wealth, and where even during the week people eat white bread and soup. So America represents the promise of wealth and financial success. The $20, though, from the father, along with his photograph, represents also the emotional cost of separation. The mention of these specific details, the money, the photograph, the promise of reunion, perfectly captured the reality of Jewish immigrant life during this period. It also allows for an understanding of the price paid for the dream, a family torn apart, also a common feature of the Jewish mass migration across the Atlantic. The protagonist of the song, a left behind wife and mother, and a little child, will also appear time and again in Sholem Aleichem's short stories and novels about America. For example, Shane Shendel, the shadow of the missing husband father Menachem Mendel, who is involved in one adventure after another to his wife's dismay, and eventually leaves to America when she is still in Eastern Europe in the old home. And the Jewish child, like Motl, for example, the ever cheerful orphan who looks forward to the fortune and looks forward, to the future and makes his way to America with his mother and brother after his father dies. The theme of Jewish cultural assimilation, particularly Americanization, becomes a central focus in many of Sholem Aleichen's works. This preoccupation manifests in various texts. The concluding chapters, as I said, of Menachem Mendel, Blondchen den Stern, Wandering Stars, Der Mistake, The Mistake, and the final chapters of Tevye der Milchiker, Tevye the Dairyman. Also, his shorter stories, including Nishtoke Nayas, Otherwise There's Nothing New, Mr. Green Hot a Job, Mr. Green Has a Job, and A Maise with a Greenhorn, a story of a greenhorn, all grapple with these themes. Perhaps most significantly, the second part of Motl Peisidem Chazan's, Motl the Cantor son, provides Sholem Aleichen's most developed exploration of Jewish American identity upon migration and the Jewish family on the move. As Honish Merrill observed, the comparison between here and there, between the oldest European home and the new home in America, is a constant element in his work about immigration and about the immigrants' environment. At times, this comparison also becomes the structural foundation for the exploration of the American themes. And we can see the seeds of this comparison in the song Shloch My Kind, where the contrast between the American dream and the East European reality is stressed. This literary engagement coincided with the peak of Jewish mass migration to the United States. Between 1880 and 1924, approximately 2.5 million Jewish immigrants settled in the United States, primarily from the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Romania. The concentration of these immigrants in urban centers, particularly in New York, was remarkable. By 1910, Jews constitute about 1.2 million of New York City's 4.7 million residents. And this map from 1910 shows that the darker parts are the Lower East Side, as we call it today, very dense area with very poor population, mostly immigrants, many of them Jewish immigrants. Most of these immigrants found themselves living in tenement apartments like the one shown here. Their living conditions, domestic experiences, and social adventures would become both symbolic of the immigrant experience and central to many of Sholem Aleichem's American stories. This brings us to the centerpiece of today's presentation, the newly discovered letter, which you can see here. During my research at the YIVO archives, while examining the Herman Bernstein collection, I encountered a folder marked undated and unidentified. Within it lay a 4-page handwritten letter. You can see 3 of the 4 pages, distinguished by its elegant penmanship, but lacking both date and letterhead. The discovery of Sholem Aleichem's signature at the bottom of the final page confirms its significance, and you can see the autographed signature at the bottom of the 4th page. It is very similar to the one we saw here on the manuscript of the song Shlok My King. Allow me to share the letter content in Yiddish and in English translation, and then we'll discuss it. So I'll start with the Yiddish. Ich bett Mr. Bernstein zu sagen, dorten, wo wir haben geredet über jüdische Kinder, wir so schnell wären Amerikaner Patrioten, wollte ich wegen sich aufstellen auf folgende Fakt. Ich bin gewesen in Educational Alliance und habe angerechnet die ganz kleinen jüdischen Kinder, welche seien angekommen in Amerika erst mit 3, 4 und 2 Monaten. Und auf der Frage, seien sie zufrieden mit dem neuen Land und für was haben sie nicht wie Russland, haben sie mit Stolz, mit Bitternis geantwortet. Russland, verrichten wir, der Fall, wo sie hat sich als so Müs begangen mit unserer Tates, Mames und Schwestern. Und Amerika gleichen wir, der Fall, wo da seien wir gleich mit allem. I wish to tell Mr. Bernstein, there where we've talked about Jewish children, how quickly they become American patriots, I wanted to add to that the following fact. I have been to the Educational Alliance and ran into quite young Jewish children who came to America for the first time 3, 4, and 2 months ago. And to my question, are they satisfied with the new land and why did they not love Russia? They answered with pride bitterly. We despise Russia because there our fathers and mothers and sisters were treated so badly. And we love America because here we're equal to everyone else. These last words were said not as an educational lesson, but rather in an expressive tone, with fire and pride. Those moments which I spent in the Educational Alliance, I'll never forget. This is the first part, and this is the second part. Es hat mir gemacht eine große Freude, wenn ich beim Abschied nehmen sich gewinnt zu die kleinen Brüderlach und Schwesterlach mit einer kurzen Rede und hab sie gesagt. Ihr kennt mich, ihr weißt nicht, wer ich bin. Ich bin ein Immigrant, ein rausgeschmissener Iberiker, wir alle. Aber als ihr wird kommen nachher, wird ihr erzählen eure Eltern, als da ist die Welt bei euch am modernen Nefesh von Russland, mit dem modernen Namen Sholem Aleichem. Oben die kleinen Nefeschlach nicht gelassen mir fortsetzen. Ein raschdicker Applaus hat bedeckt meine Wörter. Ja, lieber Freund, ich will vor dem Applaus umgegeben 40 größere Applausen von großen Menschen. Die Period for the Jersey, of I'm pronouncing it right, Sholem Aleichem. It made me very happy when upon leaving, I turned towards those young brothers and sisters with a short lecture and told them, you know me and do not know who I am. I am an immigrant, an outcomer, an other, just like you are. But when you come back home, you'll tell your parents that here was a weird person from Russia with a weird name, Sholem Aleichem. The young individuals didn't let me finish. A loud applause covered my words. Yes, my dear friends, but that applause I would give away 40 louder applauses from great people. And now move on. Sholem Aleichem. Okay, so this is the letter, and let's unpack it and discuss its content and its time and space framing. So although the letter is undated, some details may indicate its time and circumstances of composition. Sholem Aleichem lived, as I said before, in America between October 1906 and June 1907, and again between December 1914 and May 1916, when he died in New York. On his first arrival, he came with his wife Olga and his son Numa on the ship St. Louis, escaping the anti-Semitic riots in Kiev he and his family had witnessed, and hoping for success in the Yiddish theater and press in the United States. These attempts failed, and Sholem Aleichem returned to Europe in 1907 disappointed. His second stay in America was a much more realistic one. This time he came with his wife Olga and three of his six children, Stina and her husband, the writer and translator Yitzhak Dov Berkowitz, his daughter Marusi, and his son Numa, after the outbreak of World War I, leaving behind his married daughter Liali, his younger daughter Emma, and his ill son Michael Misha, which died later that year. He published in the Yiddish daily Der Tog and other Yiddish newspapers in the United States, and his work was widely acknowledged. The event mentioned in the letter could have therefore occurred in one of these two periods. The event, as Sholem Aleichem mentioned, occurred at the Educational Alliance. You can see it at the background of the screen, which was founded in 1889 to support Eastern European Jewish immigrants in New York and promote Americanization. And the photo at the background is a cooking class held at the Institute. Sholem Aleichem is writing about the swift Americanization of Jewish immigrant children, the reason for which was, quote, "We despise Russia because there our fathers and mothers and sisters were treated so badly, and we love America because here we are equal to everyone else," end quote. So the Jewish children are very aware, apparently, of the political status of their families and are appreciative of the freedom they're entitled to in America. Can this view help us date the letter? And what can we learn from that on Sholem Aleichem's own views on America in general and the future of Jewish children in particular? The second part of the letter might help us better understand its historical context. Sholem Aleichem said to the children, "You know me and do not know who I am. I am an immigrant, an outcomer, and other just like you are. But when you come back home, you'll tell your parents that here was a weird person from Russia with a weird name, Sholem Aleichem." So apparently, during this visit at the Educational Alliance, the children didn't recognize Sholem Aleichem. That is, his face wasn't sufficient for the children to know who he was. However, his name was well known, famous enough for the young audience to hear it and react with a loud applause. Upon Sholem Aleichem's first visit to the United States in 1906, the Evening World published an interview between Nicola Greeley-Smith and the Yiddish writer. You can see it on the screen. It was only a few days after his arrival to New York, and the spontaneous enthusiasm and genuine excitement are clear. Greeley-Smith asked Sholem Aleichem, the Jewish Mark Twain, as the title says, about the funniest thing he had seen in America, to which he replied, I recall no funny things. The most remarkable thing is the difference in the spirit of the Jewish people in the atmosphere of the ghetto. In Russia, the Jew lives in and looks to the future. The present means for him only gloom, persecution, and despair. Here, there is the wonderful feeling of hope, of liberty, equality, fraternity. And he goes on. A little Jewish boy of 4 down on the east side, sorry, said to me the other day, I am an American. And he said it so proudly that I heard in the exclamation all the intoxication of hope that I have felt myself since I landed here. And he further writes, I have been among my people, talked with them in their shops without their knowing me. These words are very similar to the ones we saw on the letter, the Jewish boy incident, and also the incident where he visits the people, as he said. Beside the similar language and the same subterfuge, the last sentence can provide further evidence for the earliness of the letter. In 1914, let alone 1916, it is hard to imagine a Jewish immigrant in the Lower East Side, a child or an adult, who wouldn't recognize Sholem Aleichem. A disguised Jew seems simply impossible. Around October 1906, on the other hand, shortly after his arrival in the United States and before his tour in Europe from 1907 onwards, it is reasonable to assume that Shalom Aleichem could have taken such a tour, that is, his name was recognized, but his face not necessarily so. By the way, in this photograph, you can also see Shalom Aleichen's signature, only it's upside down. So it's a bit weird. The axis of the letter is the theme of Jewish children in America and their degree of Americanization, a theme Shalom Aleichem further developed later in his work, most famously through the character of Motl, the Cantor son. This literary development is expressed in a letter from Sholem Aleichem to Chaim Nachman Bialik, a close friend and by then a well-known Hebrew writer. In a letter from Sholem Aleichem to Bialik from summer 1907, sent from Geneva, he writes, I'll read the Yiddish and then the English. Ich schick euch do lesate die ersten 6 Stück von meinem Motl Paisi dem Chazens und noch 20 seinen Alauvnein während geschleift. Die 20 behandeln Motl Paisis in Amerika, a neue Welt für jüdische Kinder. I send you now the first 6 parts of Motl the Cantor's son, and I have 20 more in the making, in the final touch-up stage. These 20 are about Motl, Pace's son in America, a new world for Jewish children, which is also the title I chose after this talk. So already in 1907, Sholem Aleichem was working intensively on the Motl stories, undoubtedly inspired by his recent visit to America. Dan Meron has already shown that the idea to write the Motl stories emerged during this visit, and the first Motl story was actually published in May 1907. What I argue is that Sholem Aleichem's encounter with these little Jewish brothers and sisters, these young immigrants, a handful of Motls, shaped this character. A chapter from Motl demonstrates that sentiment. This part I'll read only in English. Pini Motl's friend says, there is a law in America that little boys have to go to school. Otherwise, their parents are punished. In America, parents get punished for the children's mischief. On the other hand, Children are taught at school free of charge. In the old country, Jewish children were kept from going to school, while here in America, they're actually dragged to school by their followers. And if they should refuse to go, they get punished. Only for this, says Pliny, Russia can bury itself in the earth for shame. You've forgotten that you're in America, the country of freedom and equality, and not in Russia, the land of swine. You forgot that all American millionaires and billionaires have worked in their youth by the sweat of their brows and have made their fortunes at menial tasks. Ask Rockefeller or Carnegie, ask Morgan or Vanderbilt, ask any of them what they used to do in their youth. Or look at the great people of this country, Washington, for instance, or Lincoln, or Roosevelt. Were they all born great? Were they all presidents from birth? Or take our present president, Mr. Wilson himself. What did he used to be? Begging your pardon, nothing but a teacher. So here we can almost hear through this chapter the words from Sholem Aleichem's letter, how quickly Jewish children are Americanized and how proud they are to be Americans. In the chapter, however, there is also irony and exaggeration in these words spoken by Pliny, a sense of irony and complexity that is missing from the 1906 letter. After all, the readers know that not everyone would be a Rockefeller or a Carnegie, and they are aware of Wilson's career other than being a teacher. It seems that the letter represents a moment in time in which Sholem Aleichem was exposed to the Jewish American experience, enchanted by it, and driven to make it into a theme in his work. Later in his life, however, when his own American experience was more established and more complex, he represented the hopes and possibilities America offered for Jewish children, mainly children, but also its challenges and limitations for immigrants and the price it had for Jewish tradition. And let's take maybe a last example from the story Nishto Kenayas, otherwise there's nothing new, from 1907, which is a correspondence between a friend in America and his friend in the Russian empires in some shtetl, in some small town. And this short story is actually two letters, one from Eastern Europe to America and the other one from America to Eastern Europe, and it is called Two Happy New Year Letters. This is the title of both of them. So I have to read the Yiddish because it's so it's important for the context. My dear friend Israel, לשנה טובה תכתבו ותחתמו דו בדיין וייף ובדיין children, ihr sollt sein all right mit כל ישראל Amen. Und wegen mir, wo soll ich dir schreiben, my dear friend? Ich bin all right. Und my wife is all right. Und meine children seien all right. Danken Gott, wir machen do alle Leben. Wir arbeiten schwer und bitter, aber wir machen ein Leben. Kein Geld safen wir nicht, nur mit Vernehmen 2 Rooms mit der Kitchen. Al ganzen Tag arbeiten wir und bei Nacht gehen wir a Royce of Pleasure. Oder auf ein Meeting von Sozialisten, oder von Zionisten, oder go in jiddischen Theater. Eine Sache geht uns da nicht ein, die Heim. Oi, wendet sich ein Heim. And I'm sure you can hear from the Yiddish original how much English there is in it. It's almost impossible to translate because it's so soaked in English words. And the English version is maybe easier to read, but some of the Yiddish, some of the contrast is lost in translation. So again, here we see the comparison and even the chasm between here and there, between adults and children, between English and Yiddish. The language itself represents this situation. Success and frustration, tradition and alienation, etc. And this motif of comparison and of the inability to connect the worlds is also present here. So the friend can hardly understand what Israelic writes because it's not really Yiddish. It's so full with English. If he can understand the English, you wouldn't understand the letter at all. And at the same time, while the friend from America is saying, I'm all right, we're all right, and this hyperbolic all rightness is also a bit sad or bitter because, as it says in the end, the only thing we miss is home. We're homesick, something awful. So the one thing one can't get in America is the sense of being at home, and he misses the old home, his old home, and it also represents home in a broader sense, the Jewish tradition and the cultural context, which is again lost in translation, but also lost in migration often. And so we can see time and again in Sholem Aleichem's writing on America this double-faced perspective on America and what it enables, again, especially for children, and by what it takes and what the cost of this opportunity. The letter from the YIVO archives captures a moment in time, Sholem Aleichen's life and Jewish mass migration to the United States, and depicts it so vividly and gracefully. Furthermore, the letter serves as a means of understanding Sholem Aleichen's own state of mind during his first days in America, including his instant amazement and surprise in the face of the American Jewish child experience. The letter revealed here adds another piece of Sholem Aleichen's epistolary legacy, illuminating a hitherto unknown part in his life and work. In conclusion, this letter provides invaluable insight into a pivotal moment in both Sholem Aleichen's personal journey and the broader narrative of Jewish immigration to America. It captures his initial amazement at the transformation of Jewish immigrant children and helps us understand the genesis of his later literary works on the American Jewish experience. The latter serves as a crucial document in understanding both Sholem Aleichen's development as a writer and the larger historical context of Jewish immigration to America. The little boy from the lullaby, Shlof my kin, sleep my boy, indeed made it to America, and Sholem Aleichem was anticipating a bright future for him. His mother, though, might have been less lucky and had to face more struggles, as Sholem Aleichem himself did, and as his more mature protagonist faced, like Motl's mother, for example. This, however, can be found in other letters. Thank you.
Thank you, Yael. That was really interesting. I think it's so fascinating how Sholem Aleichem, how you tracked, this notion of America and its promise. You tracked it from this initial lullaby that he writes through this letter and the subsequent literature he creates, and how it's, really in a certain way all about the future um, you know, the fact that he's talking about children who, essentially are the future of any culture, how he, wants to address them and wants to involve them in his work. So I thought that was really fascinating. Um, I have a question for you, but before I start, I just wanted to mention to the audience, if you do have a question, please put it in the question and answer section of the Zoom. Um, and not in the chat. So and we'll get to those as soon as I ask my question. So you started with this lullaby that I think he writes in, I think it's 1892. Is that it?
Yes.
And it references America, that the father has gone to America, but also notes that America is this sort of fantastic place where everyone is happy, and it's something very special and unique, and it's a place that he hadn't even been. So to a certain degree, I'm curious, you know what what shaped his perception of America, before he had even arrived there. I'm just curious if you have any insight into that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So I think, well, first of all, the mass migration was already happening, maybe not in full gear, but like very massive from the 1880s. So by 1890s, it was more than a decade of Jewish mass migration. So, and the Yiddish press and sorry, not much of a Yiddish press in Eastern Europe there, but the Hebrew press and the Jewish Russian press were full with reports and articles about what's happening in America, and also um, advertisement for ship tickets by then. So this experience was viewed from the other side of the Atlantic, was uh, pretty well known. It's not as he experienced it himself, but there was a broad notion of what it's like, this mass migration to America, and what America promises. It's not exactly the reality, but what it promises to the immigrants, and the Jewish immigrants in particular. And I think this is the background for this lullaby.
Right. And obviously he gives this sort of, glowing portrayal of America, but I think for a lot of immigrants, they were, very much impoverished. And this is also somewhat reflected in what he wrote in the example that you gave, that we work really hard, but we're free. And so that was sort of the key aspect, that Jews
Right.
Jews weren't oppressed as they had been
Yeah,
in Russia.
yeah, and it's the fantasy versus reality. So the poem, the song implies it, and then his later stories actually show this reality as he himself saw it when he came to America and was uh, overcoming his amazement.
Right, right. Um, okay. Actually, just before we get to the audience questions, I'm curious, how did you come across this letter?
As I was at the YIVO archives, I went to the Herman Bernstein collection because I was looking for materials on the Yiddish press. This was my research project at the time, and then this folder was just made me curious. What's undated and unupdated, and it could be interesting. So I opened it, and then the rest is history, I guess. And always open envelopes and folders. It went at the archives. That's my advice. And there were other letters signed by Sholem Aleichem in this folder. So it wasn't, um, someone did see other letters from Herman Bernstein to Sholem Aleichem, or vice versa, and identified them. But this folder was for some reason not unidentified. So
Right.
it was
Um,
my treasure.
right. No, actually, it's true. If in the YIVO archives, there are, incredible, you'll find incredible things. You just really have to go open up, like you have to just open every envelope, turn every page, um,
Yeah.
in order to find these things. So, someone in the question and answer section, and again, if people have questions, please put them in the question and answer section of the Zoom. Someone asked who Mr. Bernstein was. So I mean, I know who he is, but I'll let you, since the Yiddish press is something you've worked on, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That's a great question. Herman Bernstein was born in 1876. He was a Russian-born Jewish man, and he immigrated to the United States in 1993. I think he settled in America, and he became a journalist, an author, and a translator, and later a diplomat. And he lived first in Chicago and then moved to New York. And he was sorry, one of the founders of the Yiddish daily, the Talk, and also the editor. And he was in touch with Sholem Aleichem, um, as I mentioned, as early as 1906 when Sholem first visited America, and then later he published in his Biltog short stories by Sholem Aleichem several times a week, twice a week, usually in his daily. And during the second period, Sholem Aleichem was from 1914 to 1915 to 1916. He published Sholem Aleichem stories regularly in his their talk. So he was also in touch with, of course, non-Yiddish American journalists, which was beneficial for the Yiddish press and for him and for Sholem Aleichem, as we saw, and a very important figure in the history of the American Yiddish press.
Yeah. Okay. So there's Herman Bernstein. There's your answer. And then the same person actually asks, I love this question. What do we know about what Sholem Aleichem's wife's life was like while she was in New York? I'm
Okay, great.
sure that's a
Yeah.
good question. Like, what was her life wherever they lived? What was that like?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, Olga Rabinowitz was a dentist. She was one of the first Jewish women to be a dentist, and I don't know how much she worked really as a dentist, but this was her job. And when this funny story in one of Shalom Aleichem letters about her, when they're in New York and she does laundry. This is what he says, and he says to one of his children. Um, about mama, the mama mother is doing laundry and she's relatively happy, something like that. Of course, on the second period they were in the United States. It was more stressful. The son Misha was very sick and later died, and they were both devastated by the news arriving around Yom Kippur. Um, um, and as far as I know, she didn't work outside the house when they were in the United States. And when they were in Eastern Europe, uh, her mother, Mrs. Loyev, lived with them. So that's another part of the family history. And since Shalom Aleichem lost his money at the Russian um, stock market. So his mother-in-law had to lend him money to live, and then he lost it again. So she lived with them, and the story goes that she didn't speak to him until she died. Um, so sh so Olga lived with her mother and the rest of the family. But of course, her mother didn't join them to the United States. She died before, And as far as I know, she didn't work outside the house. After he died in 1916, she was involved not as it's like the Berkovich son-in-law, but was involved in the copyright issues and his uh, literary legacy um, in the decades following his death.
Interesting. So again, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll get to them. If not, one of the interesting things here is that of the sort of three great Yiddish writers, Sholem Aleichem, Yud Lamed Peretz, and Mendele Mocher Sforim, Sholem Aleichem is the only one who really made serious inroads into American Yiddish culture. This I think is in large part because he went to America twice, and also died here. But it's just sort of interesting to note, his sort of notion of a Jewish future being in America, rather than in Eastern Europe. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but it's just sort of like as I said before, he's addressing the issue of Jewish children in America, and there's sort of this Jewish future in America, this Yiddish future that he's trying to, create in some way. That obviously the other writers don't do at all because they have no connection to this place.
Right. I think it's a matter of his own biography. He can write about America in a way that the Peretz and Mendele couldn't. But I think it's also his perception of what is the future of Jewish life. And I think his perception is more advanced, so to speak, than that of Mendele and Yudamet Peretz, in that he is foreseeing the future of the Jewish society. He's foreseeing the collapse of the small town, the shtetl, which of course Mendele and Peretz see, but they react in a way that is not very empathic to the people. And Sholem Aleichem has this basic empathy to his characters and to the Jewish people in general. And I think also as he sees the direction is towards America, so he is also looking there because that's what the Jewish people is what interests him. And so and again, his own biography enables him to do that in a more accurate way, in a first-hand impression kind of way. And so I think it's of course it's no coincidence that he's the one who's explaining the Jewish future or the Jewish situation for his readers. I don't know if that answers the question. You can ask again if I didn't answer.
No, it definitely gives some good insight into it. Okay, so we're out of questions. I'd like to thank you, Yael, for this lecture. It's excellent. And thanks to everyone who joined us. If you liked what you heard and saw, please consider making a donation to YIVO. We cannot provide these fellowships without your support. And we appreciate those who do support us. Once again, I'd like to thank Yael Levy for this. She's the 2023-2024 Dina Abramovich Emerging Scholar Fellow. So thanks to everyone, and we will see you next time for another YIVO Fellowship lecture.